Hi. Yeah. During your speech, you made a lot of references to Jewish people as well as certain people in your audience, not Jewish people in general, but certain people, especially in your audience, to Nazis. Now, that is extremely offensive when certain people are German, and they're also extremely offensive to people who've actually suffered under Nazi rule.
I don't respect that anymore. I really don't. I don't like and I don't respect the crocodile tears the crocodile tears. No, I'm sorry, folks. Allow me to finish and allow me to finish. Listen, sir. Allow me to finish. Sir. I don't like to play before an audience the Holocaust card. But since now I feel compelled to. My late father was in Auschwitz. My late mother, please shut up. My late father was in Auschwitz. My late mother was in Majdanek concentration camp. Every single member of my family on my father's side,
the Jews did not take arms against the
my
Germans.
late father was in Auschwitz concentration camp. My late mother was in Majdanek concentration camp. Every single member of my family on both sides was exterminated. Both of my parents were in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And it's precisely and exactly because of the lessons my parents taught me and my two siblings that I will not be silent when Israel commits its crimes against the Palestinians. And I consider nothing more despicable than to use their suffering and their martyrdom to try to justify the torture, the brutalization, the demolition of homes that Israel daily commits against the Palestinians. So I refuse any longer to be intimidated or browbeaten by the tears. If you had any heart in you, you would be crying for the Palestinians, not for what's inside.
Oh, this is gonna be a great one. So, top 10 moments with Dr. Norman Finkelstein. So, it's powerful because he is a child of Holocaust survivors. So, you can't use a Holocaust card on him. And that girl who was just breaking down into tears, having a mental breakdown, you would think that she was in the Holocaust. Anyways, let's continue with this video. Make sure you like and subscribe to this channel. Let's go.
My criticism of Norman Finkelstein is slightly more prosaic. I have no problem at all with writers being provocative. It's what I am paid to do. But you're not very good at it. You're a hack writer. You made a factual error.
Well, you're certainly entitled to your opinion. I don't know of any expertise. I don't know of any expertise you have in the topic.
You understated by a large number the number of Holocaust survivors.
That's the last question.
Okay,
Very briefly.
I would like to answer
Very
that.
briefly, please.
I don't claim at all to be an authority in the Nazi Holocaust. The book, The Holocaust Industry, is not about the Nazi Holocaust. It's a book about how the Holocaust has been rendered in popular opinion and in so-called scholarship. The figure I got of under 100,000 survivors of the Nazi Holocaust, it didn't come from me. It came from Raoul Hilberg. I think you'll agree if you have any knowledge of the Nazi Holocaust, which is doubtful, but if you have any knowledge of the Nazi Holocaust, you'll know that the world's leading authority in the Nazi Holocaust, bar none, was Raoul Hilberg. He was in a class all his own. Raoul Hilberg praised the Holocaust industry. In fact, he said my conclusions in the book were conservative. Now, Raoul Hilberg was begged by the U.S. Holocaust Museum and his close friend Elie Wiesel to remove his name from the book. And he said, no, I refuse to remove my name from the book because what Finkelstein wrote is true. He said Finkelstein's place in history as a historian is secure. And what was done to me was a travesty. So when you come along and say you're a hack writer, I attach as much value to that as I attach to the dust on this floor.
That was a famous moment from Mehdi Hassan's head-to-head episode, his debates that he would have. And that's so true. The internet has allowed, to a certain extent, anyone to criticize anyone. I mean, myself included. So there's a nobody criticizing Dr. Norman Finkelstein, who is one of the most credible sources on this topic. I mean, He's a child of Holocaust survivors. He studied this for years, may I say decades. Who are you to, try to slander his reputation?
But if you can't start from a basic humanity position of saying what happened on October the 7th was a disgusting terror attack worthy of condemnation, then for me, I find it very hard to then respect anyone's demand for people to condemn Israel and their response.
You ask me why I won't condemn them. Because those young men were born into a concentration camp. They were born into among the most dense populated places on God's earth. Half of the population of Gaza is children. 70% are refugees who were expelled from Israel in 1948 and their descendants. 70% of Gaza's youth have no jobs, no future, no nothing. They are Susan Boyle times 10,000, never given a chance. And as things looked the night before October 7th, when the question of Gaza was disappearing from the public stage, I will admit to you, Piers, I myself have given up on Gaza. The people
Professor
of
Finkelstein.
Gaza have the right to hate the people who destroyed their lives.
Professor Finkelstein.
I think
So the reason why I find that moment very powerful is because Piers Morgan's show, everyone knows he does this for the views, right? He asks everyone, oh, do you condemn Hamas, right? And Norman Finkelstein is one of the few people who was able to eloquently say that, yeah, I don't. And, in a way, I understand why they do what they do. If someone was coming to attack your home, your family, would you not stand up and fight, or would you just let them do it? And so he's one of the few brave guys that actually does say that, and say that, the kind of environment that they grew up in, it's what caused what it is. Like, it didn't just happen randomly. It's not just a random act of violence. Israel's actions deliberately caused it, and any normal person probably would do the same in that situation.
you are. If you care about the lives of Palestinians and Israelis and everybody else, that means there has to be some kind of way of resolving this that is based in reality. And in reality, whatever way you look at it, you've got two tribes that absolutely hate each other with good reason for both sides to hate each other, because there's been atrocity against both sides throughout history. You may argue about who's responsible and blah, blah, blah. Reality on the ground is this is where we are.
Yes.
So my question is, how should Israel have reacted in that situation in the real world?
What in the real world should the Palestinians have done if they tried negotiations, they gestured to supporting either a two-state settlement, here I'm referring to Hamas, or what they called a hudna, a long-term ceasefire, when in March, beginning March 30th, 2018, they tried, not least because of my encouragement, they tried nonviolent civil resistance. And what was the Israeli response? We know exactly. There's a 250-page, single-spaced UN report describing the response. Israel took its best snipers, lined them up along the perimeter fence, and while there was this festive, to use the word of the UN report, atmosphere among the Palestinians, there was music, there was dancing, there was song. The snipers, I'm quoting the report, intentionally targeted children, intentionally targeted medics, intentionally targeted journalists, intentionally targeted disabled people. They described double amputees 300 meters from the perimeter fence that Israel shot. When they didn't kill them, they targeted them from the kneecap down to inflict, to use the technical term, life-changing injuries, which for the layperson translates as paralyze them. One Israeli sniper boasted to Haaretz newspaper, Israel's most serious newspaper, He shot 42 kneecaps in one day, 42 children and adults paralyzed for life. And so when all the options of diplomacy, nonviolent civil resistance, when they've been exhausted, what were they supposed to do?
So trigonometry, I'm not too familiar with them. I saw an interview with them and Bassem Youssef, but a lot of people commented that their podcasts, their interviews are actually not that bad, but they are just very, very ignorant in the Palestine, Gaza, Israel issue. And I've seen that myself. In the interview with Bassem Youssef, that guy with the glasses, he didn't even know what the significance of Jerusalem was to Muslims. How ignorant is that? People just know one side of the story and just think they know it all and they want to fight and be all passionate and argue and debate. Go read a book first, man.
Let me ask you a simple question, okay? If you're at war with Gaza, why are you shooting children in the skull and in the chest? The New York Times published an article on that, came under a lot of flack because they published that article. They said we can't refute the evidence. We have the x-rays in front of us. They're shooting children in the head, in the skull, and in the chest. If you're engaged in the war in Gaza, why are you killing journalists? Why are you killing medics? Why are you killing UN workers? If you're engaged in the war with Hamas, why is it that Human Rights Watch just this past week put out a report? They tell people where to flee. They say go to the safe zones. Human Rights Watch says when the people are directed, they're being shot at the road.
But are you seriously saying, but hang on. Let me respond.
When they get to the safe areas,
I understand. I've already made that point.
Israel drops 2,000-pound bombs on
I've made
them.
that very point.
Does that sound like a war?
No, I've made it,
or does that sound like a genocide? What does it sound like?
Well, it's interesting. Okay, let's get into that because it's an interesting part of the debate. It's horrendous that UN workers, journalists, children, women have all been killed. It's horrendous.
Targeted.
Well, okay, they quibble with the word targeted. They say it's collateral damage as they've gone after terrorists.
When you shoot a child,
here's my question, Norman.
When you shoot
Norman,
a child
here's my
in
question.
the skull, that's
Norman,
not collateral
can
damage.
you tell me?
The United Nations.
That's so true. How do you call that collateral damage when you shoot a child? And again, he's speaking the truth. There's actually there are doctors with proof that these children have been shot in the skull. That doesn't happen by mistake by a sniper.
Conference on Trade and Development, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, 1,000 humanitarian and economic organizations have all reached the same conclusion. It's very simple. The main cause of the disaster in Gaza is Israel's illegal blockade of that parcel of land. Full stop.
That's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. That's false.
Who's wrong? Who's wrong? That is
That's
wrong. The World Bank is wrong.
blockade,
The International Monetary Fund is wrong. They're all wrong.
Yes.
Are they all
I-
anti-Semitic?
yes,
Is
I
that
don't-
what's going on?
I didn't say that. They're wrong. I happen to know
So
more
why
about
are they
the
all
law
wrong?
than any. The military occupation was lawful. The blockade was lawful. Every country has the right to defend itself from rockets, from terror tunnels, from people coming over the border, murdering and kidnapping people. Those are all lawful. I'm telling you that as an expert in international law and the law of war.
Okay.
If you want to dispute me, get an expert who knows something about international law.
Okay.
Not a polemicist like you.
Professor Dershowitz, okay. Professor Dershowitz, just as a matter of fact, I teach the laws of war. I've been teaching it for the last 5 years. To my understanding,
you're biased.
Okay, Professor Dershowitz. Okay, Professor Dershowitz, let's agree. I'm completely ignorant. Let's take that as a point of departure. How does it come to be that every humanitarian and political body in the world has declared that the blockade of Gaza constitutes collective punishment and therefore is a violation, a breach of international law, a war crime under international law? How did that come to pass?
They're wrong.
How is it that
First of all, you're wrong.
They're all wrong.
No, you're not.
They're all
You're not
wrong,
right.
except
You're
Alan
not right.
Dershowitz.
No.
Except
You're wrong.
Sir,
you're wrong in describing.
Professor Dershowitz.
You're wrong in describing every group. There are many
name
groups.
Me one, okay. Professor Dershowitz, name me one international legal body or human rights organization. Name me one. I'll take the pause. Name me one that says the blockade of Gaza is not collective punishment. Name me one.
The Lawfare Project in the United States.
The Lawfare Project. I said, name me one international legal or political body.
It is.
One.
It is. No,
Everybody's listening
international
now.
legal body.
Piers Morgan
It's
has a
an
very large
international-
audience. Name me
It's-
one
it's an international-
or legal or political body that says the blockade of Gaza is legal. Name me one.
It
Name me
is
one.
legal, and every organization that I have been associated with, the Lawfare Project, the project
I
run by a
believe
woman
that.
named Leitner, and
I
the
believe
International
that.
Project, were have all concluded that the blockade
I
is
said
legal.
one
Also,
legal or
the Israeli
political
Supreme.
body. Benny Morris.
So few things I want to mention there. First of all, he says that Norman Finkelstein has no idea what he's talking about, yet Norman Finkelstein is a professor that teaches law in a very prestigious university. Second of all, he says that Israel has a right to defend itself after October 7th, blah, blah, blah. And that's fine. Self-defense, I believe, is a moral right. You should be able to defend yourself. But then why is this such a big deal when before October 7th, Palestinians are defending themselves and it's like, oh my God, as soon as they try to defend themselves, it's called terrorism. So I find that very, very odd. Also, last thing I wanted to mention, isn't that guy Epstein's lawyer? Hint, hint, yes he is.
I don't know whether Israel has nuclear weapons. Well, that's a very odd thing for him to say, because Benny Morris has been explicitly blackmailing the West since 2008, saying if you don't, meaning the United States, if the U.S. doesn't join in an attack on Iran, we, meaning Israel, have no alternative except to use non-conventional, that is to say, nuclear weapons. So, if I can quote him now, it is doubtful that its conventional capabilities will be sufficient to destroy the Iranian nuclear project. Then, non-conventional weaponry will have to be used to stymie the project. And many innocent Iranians will die. But the Iranians will have brought this upon themselves by bringing to power and leaving in power a leadership that will have forced Israelis to do what was necessary in order to survive. So, Benny Morris, who doesn't know whether Israel possesses nuclear weapons, nonetheless says Israel will have to use non-conventional weapons, and he says many Iranians will have to die, maybe millions, maybe tens of millions, but they deserved it because that's what he said. Mr. Morris, you can laugh till kingdom come, but I'm quoting your words. But he said that's okay because they voted for the regime.
No, this is absurd. This is
No,
absurd. I said Israel.
No.
And let me respond.
Hang on. Norman, I think Benny Morris should be able to respond to your direct charge there because you accused him of laughing at it.
I didn't charge anything. I quoted him.
No, you said he was laughing about it. So let me get to Benny Morris to explain what he's doing.
As is your want, you didn't quote me properly. What I said was that if Israel is unable with conventional weapons to destroy the Iranian project, and if the Americans don't do it in conjunction with Israel or by themselves, Israel will be forced to use non-conventional weapons and attack the nuclear installations. Not kill millions of Iranians. No. You said millions of Iranians. I've never said anything. I have never said anything about millions of Iranians. This is pure nonsense. This is pure. Norman, you are lying. You are lying.
What do you think happens if you drop?
You are lying.
Professor Morris, what do you think happens if you drop nuclear weapons on Iran? What do you think happens?
No, not on Iran. Not on Iran. You're misquoting. Norman, you are misquoting.
I'm quoting you, Professor Morris. For you to say we can't trust Iran after Israel's record on nuclear weapons, as even you so shamefacedly and shamelessly say, I don't know if Israel has nuclear weapons. You really don't. You advocate Israel's use of them in the event that the U.S. doesn't join the attack on Iran, but then you don't know if Israel has nuclear weapons. You're such a shameless liar, which is a sad fact. I spent many a week reading your books. I spent many a month reading your books. And to see how you have degenerated into a state propagandist and a bold-faced liar, very sad. Very sad.
You know what really pisses me off? It's a laugh, the dirty smirk he has, full of hubris, and just laughing, knowing darn well he lies, knowing darn well he's not he has plausible deniability. He says the truth in a way where, you could read between the lines, exactly what he means. But in the same way, if someone calls him out at it, he could just laugh it out and be like, no, you're totally misquoting me. I hate when people do that.
They make up these stories that we have to turn off the incubators in the hospitals because there's a Hamas command and control center in the basement, say, most recently of Al-Shifa Hospital. And then the spokesperson for our US Department of Defense, John Kirby, he gives a news conference 3 days ago, and he says, we have intelligence information confirming that there is a Hamas command and control center. And that justifies in the minds of the public opinion then it's okay to deny fuel to the incubators. Imagine you, Candice, your child is born prematurely and is put in an incubator where the fuel is cut off and your child that you've been carrying for 9 months suffocates to death. Is that complicated? Does it require a PhD in Middle East studies to figure these things out? Both sides. It's as complicated as my family, except for my mother and my father, being shoved into gas chambers. That's how complicated it is in my eyes.
Wow, that was a pretty deep moment. And something you'll notice is that Candace Owens seems like she's really touched by that interview. Also, I think if I saw correctly, Candace Owens was still at Daily Wire when that interview took place, which is kind of wild to me that they allowed Norman to come on with obviously Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro being king over there. Wow. But yeah, very sad. And the media never reports on that. They shut off stuff that the hospital needed for incubators, and all these babies died.
Okay. Here's a question. Professor Morris, here's a question. It's very perplexing. If you take every combat zone in the world for the past 3 years and you multiply the number of children killed by 4, every combat zone in the world, you get Gaza. Okay? So when you
what
say
is that supposed to prove?
Okay, I'm going to tell you. Just shut up.
You're relying
and I'll
on
tell
Hamas
you,
numbers.
No, I'm not
Hamas
relying.
numbers are
I'm
not
relying on the
necessarily
numbers
true.
that
You know
everybody
that.
else. I'm relying on the numbers.
Even if we take the numbers, though, what does that prove?
Those are Hamas numbers.
Okay.
Which may not
Fine,
be true.
fine,
They could invent anything because you know that they are a mendacious organization.
I know mendacious. Believe me.
You like words.
Mendacious, as in the
mendacious
Israeli
organization.
Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Okay, so here's the thing. You say they could have killed 500,000, but they only killed That's your word. They only killed 30,000.
If you believe that they deliberately target civilians, they would have killed many more. The fact is that they don't deliberately target civilians.
Professor Morris,
and you don't understand
for a historian, I don't want to understand Israeli society. You want to know the truth. I don't want to. I don't want to get inside their heads.
That's the problem.
90% of
a good historian tries to get into the heads of the various protagonists.
There's a limit. When 90% of Israelis think that Israel's using enough or too little force in Gaza, I don't want to get inside that head. 40% think that Israel's using insufficient force in Gaza. I don't want to get inside that head. I don't want to get inside the head of people who think they're using insufficient force against a population, half of which is children. I don't want to get inside that head.
So before we go on to number one, I just wanted to say a few points here. So first of all, this is very early on in the conflict with Palestine and Israel. And you saw Benny Morris saying that, oh, those numbers you're using, they're Hamas numbers. And this was very common early on in the conflict that, oh, they would just literally delegitimize the numbers just because Hamas sent them. And now we know in retrospect that those numbers were far more accurate than the numbers Israel was presenting. And that's always the case historically. Now, something else that I've noticed is those numbers were probably lower than the amount of people that actually died, which is very sad. At this point, Donald Trump basically said that there's 1.8 million people in Gaza. I think at this point that's 400,000 people less than the 2.2 million, which is basically saying around that number probably died. And in this moment, only like 30,000 people died. And even Israel, I think they're okay with a number of 100 up to 100,000. Now we have studies showing up to 100,000 people died at least. That's horrible. Now, before we go on to number one in this, just please make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel. It does allow this video to go on to a larger audience. Also, if you really want to help support this channel, a lot of these videos do get demonetized. If you want to help support this channel, feel free and become a member. It's only $2.99 a month, and I will have a link in the description below. Thank you so much. Now let's go to number one. When I already know this moment, Norman Finkelstein destroys this little kid who wants to be a YouTuber. It's hilarious, man. Puts him in his place. Now let's watch it.
The PLO Charter. What about the PLO Charter? Well, you know what? Nobody in the PLO had even read that charter. After so many years, the PLO Charter was from 1968. Nobody even read it, but they kept dragging it out to make excuses for why not to negotiate. There was perfect grounds to negotiate. Yeah, did the Soviet Union have to renounce the Communist Manifesto in order to negotiate with the West? When there were the nuclear test ban treaties that were signed with the Soviet Union, and the intercontinental ballistic missile treaties, and the anti-missile treaties that were signed with the US, was a condition for signing them that they had to denounce the Communist Manifesto? Isn't that just a completely idiotic argument? No country is obliged to renounce its founding document. The question is whether they're willing to negotiate an end to the conflict,